everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday class that shall not be named. We're here together with David, Ron, Arlene, and Michael. A lot of people out of town. I know I'm seeing Lou later, so she's going to be watching online. So the first question was one from last week that Michael's asked. How do we get the Shamash? How do we get the center or the higher cantle? Now, I don't know the answer, but if you look at the original menorah, which is the true symbol of Judaism, now a lot of people think it's the Star of David. That has been around a long time, but it really only became the symbol of the Jewish world the last 500 or 600 years. There's different theories. Some say it was a Polish community that did it. Others say that it was that when they were putting on, when they were building homes for people and they'd always put the cross on the Christian doors, they needed a simple symbol to put on Jewish doors. Others say that it's, two triangles, so there's added meaning. So for whatever reason, the Star of David over the last several hundred years has usurped the menorah as our symbol. But the menorah is an ancient symbol going all the way back to Moses. And we've seen symbols of the menorah going back at least 2,000 years. We know the Arch of Titus, you see it in other places. So we have proof that the menorah has been around for 2,000+ years. We believe it's 3,000. Star of David, some people say, I was just reading, somebody sent me something that the Star of David originated with Solomon, not David. And that may be true, but there is actually no evidence of that at all. In fact, there is no evidence that Solomon ever existed outside the Bible. There's no reference to him anywhere else. They've never found anything with Solomon from ancient times. They found some stuff with David. We read about the great bricks at the temple, and if you go to the temple and you go on the temple tunnel tour by the Western Wall, you will see those enormous giant stone things. But the menorah we know was seven branched. The one that we see at the Arch of Titus has what we think of it with the middle one higher. So whenever they developed the Hanukkah menorah, my guess is they needed to figure out what they were going to do with that higher candle, because it's 8 days long, but they have 9 candles. So what's the use for that higher candle? Today we use it to light the other candles. I'm sure there are other reasons, but I imagine one of the reasons is we have 9 candles. It's an ancient menorah. We're mimicking the menorah from the temple, from the pre-temple days, so we need to figure out a use for that. That's my guess. When you light the menorah, there's always a famous compromise between Hillel and Shammai. Is that Hillel and Shammai? Yeah, Hillel and Shammai. So does everybody know the compromise of lighting the menorah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, there are two compromises. One is, whether you light 8 the first night and then 7 the second, 6, or do it the way we do it.
right,
And
that's
the
exactly it.
compromise was you put the candles in from the right and you light them from the left.
That's exactly right. So, and that is what the compromise is. So we know we do that. So I'll look up where the Shamash comes from. Probably not that hard to find. I wonder if there's any way to find information quickly in our world. It's impossible. I don't know where I could find that kind of stuff. I'll look it up on. It's not like there's 53 million. There's 53 million about the 9th candle, but where did it come from originally? I don't know. We'll have to look that up. All right, we'll look that up later. So that's Hanukkah. I hope everybody's having a nice Hanukkah. My kids are using their Mensch on the bench, which mimics the elf on the shelf. We woke up this morning, my daughter came to me and said the mensch on the bench didn't move last night. And I had to say, well, you woke up really early. It was probably going to move a little bit later. I said, why don't you rest here? I'm going to go do something. She says, no, I want to stay with you. So I had to text my wife and call my wife and say, make sure to move the mensch on the bench because I'm holding Amira hostage upstairs right now while you do it. So we have the traditions that mimic the elf on the shelf. Now, what we're going to talk about today, and this will be our last class for this year, obviously. Next Wednesday, I will be at my mother-in-law's for Christmas, and then the Wednesday after that is December 31st, so I'm just going to cancel that class. But I thought we'd talk a little bit
No, I'll write it down.
about some of the issues we're facing today, namely, unfortunately, what we saw in Australia this last weekend. I don't know if you guys heard about the attack. And so we're seeing a lot of different, somebody just sent me a really interesting note about how governments are reacting to it, but they still are instruments of creating hate and permissible hate. And
You're talking about the one in
in
Australia?
Australia, how the governments have been very supportive of bashing Israel and bashing Judaism, and when something like this happens, they react like, what happened? I can't believe this happened. And how we have to be more proactive in society, which I think is definitely true in many cases. But again, it's hard when we're such a small population. What happened in Australia is a terrible tragedy because Australia has been usually a really good place for Jews, as is New Zealand. But in the last 3 years or so, the anti-Semitism in those places has ramped up to historical levels. So it's really unfortunate. So we say our prayers for all those, but a lot of people came up to me and say, should we go to the Hanukkah thing in the park last Sunday? Should we go to our Hanukkah thing on Friday? And of course, we always have to say you can't live in fear, because if you live in fear, that means you'll never open the door and step outside because terrible things happen. There's reasonable fear. I'm not going on a family vacation to Syria or Somalia. I'm not going to do something like that. But to not go to Forsyth Park to celebrate Hanukkah in Savannah, Georgia, or not come to the synagogue to celebrate Hanukkah is a very difficult thing, because really, you can't just let these things direct your life. You can say we're going to get more police, and a lot of people were talking about Jewish communities are the one creating the bill for anti-Semitism, because in Australia, I imagine it's the synagogues that are paying for the security when the government has been so helpful in spreading anti-Semitism. And it's one of those ironies that we have to spend so much money on our security, which we do.
As you know, I worked with Commonwealth Bank of Australia for a long time and spent a lot of time out there, have a lot of friends, a lot of Jewish friends, spent time on Bondi Beach. And the initial reaction about the government and the Jewish community is pretty negative, because the focus has been principally on gun control and tightening up,
Right.
which is pretty, serious there anyway. And obviously there were issues here in this particular case, but there hasn't been much of a sense that the broader issues need to be addressed. So there's quite a bit of unhappiness about that, it seems, at least from my circle there.
Yeah. And that's how they can avoid the situation, by stressing something else and putting blame somewhere else. So it's one of those. So I thought we'd again rehash a little bit about the history of anti-Semitism, and also remind ourselves that even with the situation we're all in with the anti-Semitism's rise, we're still in a better position than Jews have ever been in many respects. I mean, I sometimes just think about what my great-great-grandparents lives look like in the mid-19th century, which was only, in the scheme of things, not that far ago, only a couple of generations, and they're living in poverty in these little villages where Cossacks, or before Cossacks, the government, or can just come in and do whatever they want and conscript them and kill them and take money and trash their stores without any sense of Jews having power to stop it. And where we are today, where we have voices and we have the internet, and whenever something goes wrong, we make sure we are heard pretty loudly. So we still have to remember, even though it's getting worse, that we still are in a much better position than Jews have been in a long time. But where does anti-Semitism come from? That's always the question. And a lot of people think that anti-Semitism comes from, the biblical times or earlier. And the truth is, anti-Semitism is much newer, I think, than many people think. Many people think it's 3,000 years old, and that is probably not true. Because when you think of anti-Semitism is hating Jews for no reason at all. Like, there's no reason, you're hating them as opposed to hating other people. If we look at what's going on today, you don't see people attacking Russians all over the world because Russia engaged in a war with Ukraine. You don't see them attacking Somalians or Muslims in this way, or Christians who have done, so it's really unique. And so, but when does it begin? So some believe the very first anti-Semitic act was committed by Antiochus during the Hanukkah story, because he did not attack them to take their land. He was already in control of the land. He didn't attack them because they were rebelling. He didn't attack them for their money. I think so. He attacked them because they were Jewish. He said, you're not going to be able to have your religion. And we hadn't seen that previous, probably, to that moment where somebody said you can't have your religion. The gods were interchangeable. You took other people's gods. But really, after the Hanukkah story, people say, well, the Romans were anti-Semitic because they put all of these laws into place to prevent Jews from converting others, from marrying Christians. That is very debatable, because Jews and Christians both were vying for the Roman hearts and minds. Rome needed a new religion, a modern religion, and the two most obvious ones were Judaism and Christianity. Islam hadn't been created yet. And obviously, Constantine and his mom, they choose Christianity, and they create laws limiting Judaism. But was that anti-Semitic? Because Jews and Christians were in competition. They did it for a real reason. They wanted people to be Christian and not Jewish, so they also did the same thing to pagans. So it wasn't just Jews it was just Jews were probably a little bit more competitive with Christianity because we had a similar, we believed in one God. So is that anti-Semitic? It's hard to tell. Where we really see anti-Semitism take hold is about 1,000 years ago. That's where it really comes into play. That's where you start hearing people say Jews killed Jesus in bulk. And if you think about it, it is very strange because it's been 1,000 years since Jesus died. So to blame Jews 1,000 years later, when in the interim it was not used as often, is very strange. And a lot of it had to do with Jews being the only outsiders. Once you had the feudal system in place in Europe, Jews are the only outsiders, they're the easiest one to blame for anything. They're a smaller group, they look a little different. So we're going to limit the professions. During the Crusades, a lot of as the feudalistic society was being cemented, a lot of the wealthy that had estates that were going to go to the eldest son, that when one son, he goes to the eldest son, what do the other sons do? Some might go into the ministry, go to become priests, but the other ones didn't have a lot to do. So what did they do? They went to war. That's how, they decided that we're going to go attack the Muslims, which was not anti-Semitic or anti-Muslim. They're saying, we want this country back. We want Israel back. The Muslims control it. We're going to go take it. The Muslims have powerful countries. We want to fight them. So, but for Jews, we were at this point not a threat. We're not a threat to Christianity anymore. We're not a major country that's going to take over anybody. We're not allowed to convert. We're not super wealthy. That's when anti-Semitism takes hold, when they start creating havoc for Jews who are no threat in any way at all. The Muslims are a threat. Jews are not. They are a scapegoat. And that's really when anti-Semitism probably starts 1,000 years ago, when we start hearing the blood libel. When we start seeing the Crusades going across Europe, killing Jews throughout in the 14th century, was the 13th century, with the bubonic plague, blaming it on Jews. When Jews are put into only certain fields like tax collection, rent collection, money lending, that give them these terrible reputations, but where they don't have other options. So this is where we start to see this anti-Semitic trope that Jews are the ones who killed Jesus. And so we have a right to do what we need to do. So it's religious indignation, which we still see today. So it's religious indignation. Jews killed Jesus, and therefore they must pay forever. And again, there's going to be sometimes the Jews are doing fine, Jewish communities, and sometimes they're not. It's usually dependent on the situation. If there's unrest, if there's blight, if there's disease, then the Jewish community is going to do worse. We see us kicked out of England in 1290, and yet Shakespeare, a couple hundred years later, writes about Jews in very negative connotations when he's never met a Jew, because he lives in England and there are no Jews in England. And we've all read The Merchant of Venice. And other ones as well. And then you see this continual cycle of good times and negative times. Jews are invited to a country like Poland or Ukraine, and Jews are treated fairly well for a while, but once the skills they have are transferred to the non-Jewish population, once they have been taxed a lot, then the situation grows worse. Or maybe a new government comes into play, or a new pope comes in, or a new cardinal. Usually kings are pretty good to Jews because they don't like unrest, comparatively speaking. So the idea of this anti-Semitism probably starts with this idea that all of a sudden Jews killed Jesus 1,000 years later, we're going to persecute them even though they are not a threat. And that's really what we see for hundreds of years, all the way to Jews being put into the Pale Settlement in the Sephardic world, when Jews are kicked out of Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition. We see this idea that Jews are a religious threat. Now, it was different in the Sephardic world because Jews in the Muslim world were working in society. So there was some jealousy in the Muslim world because these super educated Jews have very high positions. So it's jealousy because of what we see these non-Muslims doing. Where in the Christian world, it's very different. It's not a threat. Jews are the poorest of the poor. They have certainly a money lender, so there's some that are wealthy, but a very small percentage. Where in the Muslim world, Jews are doing very well, and there is a lot of jealousy. But once the Christian world takes over, Jews again are very limited. So this is the anti-Semitism we see for a long time, and we've talked about it. It's Jews killed Jesus, righteous indignation for Jews killing Jesus. And we see that all the way until the 19th century. And the 19th century changes a lot of the viewpoints of Jews because you get a modern industrial revolution coming where all of a sudden thought and education and science and biblical criticism is taking hold. And this idea that Jews killed Jesus starts to fade a little bit, and we get a new anti-Semitism that's only going to last a short time. And what is that new anti-Semitism? It's based on science that Jews are inferior. We can prove it scientifically. We can look at their brains and their skulls. And this is not just used for Jews. This is used for people who are different, for women, for people of color, for people from different places in the world. We are inferior because we have something in our brain that makes us more money oriented, or that we are more sinful because of who we are inherently. So that means if we convert, we're still inherently worse. And that is the kind of anti-Semitism you're going to see of in the 19th century all the way till, of course, when does that type of anti-Semitism not end, but really almost come to an end? And that is after World War II. The Nazis had based their principles on being ethnically, biologically superior.
Wait.
Yes, Ron.
I understand what you're saying, and everything is negative about the Jews. But what about all the good things, all of the vaccines that they've done, everything about health and everything?
That is an excellent point. Religious indignation always allows for exceptions. Yes, there are some Jews who have done good things, but by and large, they are inferior. And you can do that with anything. You can say with women, yes, there was Marie Curie, but she is the exception to the rule that women are inferior. So, and a lot of people can always use other excuses as well. You can use excuses for anything. Maybe he's not Jewish, his grandparents were not Jewish. And in Europe, it's really ironic, and Ron, you brought it up, that all of this biological inferiority for Jews, when you have brilliant Jews in Europe, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, Mordechai Kaplan, the theologians, who am I thinking about? All of the great philosophers, I'm just forgetting all of their names right now. Artists like Chagall. So even with these people running around, you still saw this inferiority through biology being spread. And of course, it reached its height with the Nazi Party that used the 19th century as a basis for all of their laws against Jews. And so religious indignation can ignore anything. You can ignore the facts, as we'll see today.
But there's also, if I might interrupt,
Sir, please.
the other side, that people don't always appreciate those who are clever or successful.
Right.
It's all poppy syndrome. So even within, you can have the kind of dual basis for anti-Semitism, which I think came up with Einstein or Freud and others.
Right. And that dual anti-Semitism is a great
Good
irony.
point.
We see it today. All Jews are rich. Now, that's a really obvious, ironic statement because it's used as a slur. However, 10 out of 10 people, if they asked whether they'd rather be poor or rich, which would they prefer? We'd prefer to be rich. But it's used as a slur that all Jews are rich. And
By becoming rich, we're not allowing them to become rich.
that could
That's
be it as
the
well.
Yes.
yeah.
And that,
It,
but
it's all Machiavelli
right.
that root. It's
And we're going to see this once the Holocaust ends and we see what happened and the world sees. Jews are given a little bit of a pass for a while, but then we're going to see a new anti-Semitism because although the biological anti-Semitism still exists, it exists in corners, not in the mainstream, because if you say that about Jews, then you got to say it about women and African Americans and, Romano and Asians. It was used against everybody. So to use it against Jews today would be problematic in the mainstream for many reasons. So that no longer can be the anti-Semitism. The Jews killed Jesus can as well, but it's a lot of the Western world is not as religious, and many of the parts are a-religious. So the new anti-Semitism came with the advent of Israel. All of a sudden, Israel becomes the main demon, and now they call them Zionists, and so Zionists are the worst people on earth. That means Israel and anybody who's Jewish, which again is a big irony because we know what's really gone on over there, but we also see that other peoples are doing things and are completely ignored. Yes, the Western world is rooting for Ukraine, but you don't see people busting into Russian bars or Russian Catholic churches and attacking them because they're attacking Ukraine. But yet you see people attacking Jews around the world physically and even more verbally because of what they perceive Israel is doing wrong. So the ironies are pretty much very easy to see for people who are looking, but when you're using religious indignation, you can ignore everything because religious indignation says, I am right morally. And since I am morally right, I can do anything to those who are not of my morally right opinion. And that's what we're seeing today. A complete ignorance, or not ignorance, a complete purposefulness of ignoring what other people are doing and only concentrating on what Israel's doing. Ignoring what Hamas is doing, or Syria, or Iran, or Lebanon, or Yemen, an ignorance of the rest of the world, what's going on in Somalia, or Syria, or the persecution in China or North Korea. So we're seeing and that's what religious indignation does. It gives you carte blanche to do whatever you want because you are morally right. And people, they're not it's not new to be used against Jews. It's used against people use it against everybody. But we're such a small population that it's really strange that it's used so much against us when there's 15 million Jews in the world and there's 2.6 billion Christians and 2 billion Muslims. So that's the irony. But on the other hand, Jews have also lived in very good times, and there are other peoples that are being persecuted even more. If we live in certain countries, the murder rate, the rape rate, the attacking people, the kidnapping rate are very high in a lot of countries. And it doesn't affect the Jewish community because very few Jews live in those communities. And when they do, they all gather together for protection. In a lot of these places, when they kidnap Jews and ransom them, they're not kidnapping them because they're Jewish. They're kidnapping them because they have money. And oftentimes they don't even think about attacking Jewish people because the community is so connected. But also we see that almost every Jew lives in a modern Western world, in a modern Western country. So almost all Jews are literate, educated, have professions on levels that nobody's ever seen before because we're such a small population. And we live in so few places. If you look at Christians in America, some of them are wealthier and more educated than Jews by far. But the population is so large that you also have large populations of Christians in America, South America, Central America, Africa, third world countries that are not that educated, whereas almost no Jews live in those places. So although we talk about anti-Semitism, on the other hand, Jews are doing really well percentage-wise, even with the uptick in anti-Semitism, because it's much harder to be a woman or person of color, or in other countries there are certain people that are considered persona non grata as well. So it goes both ways. Any thoughts? I think I answered all the questions. But now the debate is now what do we do? We cannot control what Israel does. And quite frankly, even when Israel does something right, they do something wrong. Because if the media is looking for something wrong, you can find something wrong in every country every single day, all day. If you want to just have a media outlet that bashes America, you can do it every day, all day long, because there's murder every day. The government does something ridiculous every day. There are government employees doing things wrong every day. If you get outside the government, you talk about people in America, we see hate groups. If you live outside America, a lot of people think America is a war zone if you just watch the news. So you can find something terrible that's going on in Israel every day, put it into the news, and connect it to Jews. And the governments can say, no, it wasn't us, we're just reporting, but we know that is not the case. As we just talked about in Australia, as David so aptly brought up, in Australia, they're dealing with gun laws now. How did these people get this gun, as opposed to why are they attacking Jews who've done nothing to them? These people were listening to ISIS, but they live in Australia. They don't live in, Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq. So it's something we're going to have to deal with, and there's a lot of difficulties for us, because if you say, well, why don't we go to the media? Why don't we do more? There's just so few of us comparatively. I mean, we're just a very small group of people, and almost none of us live in these places. David?
Can I say one more thing? Sorry. Yeah.
Oh,
But what
please.
also seems complicated, and maybe my perspective is a London-based one, but we talked about historical anti-Semitism that focused on Jews as Jews. But if you look at sort of the bigger trends, and it's in addition to the Muslim side, maybe it's there's a kind of a left-wing orientation to it. But if you look at anti-capitalism, anti-colonialism, anti-white supremacy, anti-Americanism here, when people think about, well, who are the bad guys, Jews tend to be more identifiable and organized, and I think there are synergies and overlap with those categories. I think there was a poll, maybe it's because people see, Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm and Friends here, that, people in the UK thought that 30% of the US population was Jewish.
Yeah.
So when you add all of these things that are just, huge trends now, it seems like a big task.
Yeah, and you see that's one of the interesting things you're seeing a lot on the left is these group of people they hate being American, they hate white Americans, and they're white and American.
Yeah.
They're privileged, they hate the privilege, and Jews are who they target because we're seen as being white American and privileged.
Self-loathing is a universal
Hey.
characteristic.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, I was just saying that, there's the self-loathing trope that's
Yeah.
been used in
Right.
the anti, but it seems more
Right.
general now. No, go ahead, please.
No. I mean, the self-loathing is, that there's a lot of truth in that, but I think some of it, maybe it's a small percentage. Some of it, I think, is guilt,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think you're right.
and I think that plays a, part of it. I mean, my daughter is such a minimalist, and she says, why do I need this? There are people who can't eat,
Yeah.
so what, and it goes on for forever. I mean, she's a really good person,
Oh, no, no, no.
much better than I am. but you know what I mean.
No, I do.
Yeah, oh,
It's-
absolutely. And also it's again, it's not the majority. It's a very vocal radical minority on both sides of the political spectrum. Again, another great irony is that the radicals on any side, and this would be the left and right as we look at it, are probably closer to each other than they are to their own side.
Mm.
Like if you're
Probably
radical right,
true.
radical left, you're closer to being similar to what you do to the people who are
That's
in
probably true.
and that's unfortunate because
Yeah.
we are being attacked by radicals on both sides, unfortunately. And but again, we still have our voices. And I read an interesting article that I don't know if the numbers are true that Jews donate 38% of the money we donate, which is a very large amount. I think they said 14 billion in America last year or something like that. That's all an article was to Jewish causes, where 62% was to non-Jewish causes. And we've worked so hard to ingrain ourselves, and maybe we haven't done enough to support our own institutions. That's another one of the lines we walk, supporting the non-Jewish institutions so we can really become part of the whole, but also maintaining our own institutions. And you have some groups in the Jewish world only give money to the Jewish institutions, and some in America only give to non-Jewish. So it's kind of an interesting, whereas 75 years ago it was probably a much higher percentage was given to the Jewish causes. So it's one of the things to think about, the balance that we find. But it's a difficult time. Nobody doubts that it's more difficult now to be Jewish than it was 20 years ago. We saw an end to the war in Israel, which is, you would think, have some sort of effect on it. It had none at all. Most people don't even realize it's over. And if they do, they don't care
It
because
really isn't.
the war was
I mean, there's still shooting. There's still people getting killed on both sides.
yeah.
It's really it's not over. It's just ratcheted down
Right.
significantly.
Yeah.
But
But
there's
again-
still, it's like the Korean truce in '53.
Right.
It's just
What I'm saying is that's not the real reason for what's going on, because whether Israel's at war or not, the anti-Zionist, which really is anti-Jewish campaign will rage on as it always has. It's just
True.
ratcheted up a bit. So I'm
That's
just saying
true.
Israel is just the excuse for what was going to happen anyway. So it's difficult times, definitely, but we also have to remember we shouldn't be afraid to go to Jewish events, leave our homes. 99.9% of the time it's fine. You know, you can go to the mall and there could be something happen. The roof caves in, we know there's been, mass shootings. Unfortunately, there was one at Brown the other day. We had somebody whose son killed him, the famous director Rob Reiner. What a tragedy. So you got to do what you got to do. And we should probably have talked about a little bit about his career, because he had an incredible career. So just wanted to put my sense forward. We had a great Hanukkah event on Sunday. We'll have a great Hanukkah event here Friday night. We hope everybody has wonderful times. Our thoughts go out to the families in Australia, to the Reiner family. Of course, he has been such an incredible asset to America and the Jewish world. He had I read his a list of movies, and like the first 6 movies he did as a director were all iconic. Kind of fell off a little bit after that, but if you go online, it's really, you don't always realize what he did. But we all know he was in All the Family. We know his father, Carl Reiner, and his isn't Penny Marshall his sister? Is that what it is, or his aunt? I think she may be an aunt. I don't know if it's. You guys know who Penny Marshall is?
She was the first wife, wasn't she?
I think you're right, David.
Was she
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're
Is
right.
it his stepmother, or I don't remember. I'll have to look that up.
No, Penny Marshall was his first wife.
It
I'm
was his
pretty
first
sure
wife.
of that.
Oh, his first wife. Okay, his first
Yeah.
wife. Okay. But his first, let's see here, his first films were This Is Spinal Tap, The Sure Thing, Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, and A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
7 first movies that he directed. That is 7 straight amazing classics. He did one bad movie, The North, which didn't get, and then he did The American President, which was another major success. And then after that, he really hasn't had a lot of success. As many. He did The Bucket List, which did really well, and he just did Spinal Tap 2. He did LBJ. But in terms, he'd had 7 straight classics. And his father, of course, was a great comedian, writer, director. His father was supposed to be Rob Petrie for the Dick Van Dyke Show, but they wanted to make it less Jewish.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking of Gary Marshall. That's why I got confused with Carl Reiner.
Yeah.
So they said they're going to make Carl Reiner was going to be Rob Petrie's boss on the show and make appearances now and then, because Rob Petrie was just the writer. So that was in the 60s when they were trying to get rid of Jews on television, trying to get, kind of get away from this Jewish television scene. But what happened to him was a terrible tragedy. And let me tell you, unfortunately, that the drugs issue is so terrible. It is something that knows no boundaries. It hits people of every walk of life. The only difference would be how expensive are the drugs you buy. So I've seen it in so many families through the years. Wonderful parents that just happen to have kids who get addicted very easily. Like for some of us, we could do marijuana or do drugs or alcohol, and it's not a problem at all. And others, like that, it ruins their lives. So deciding what to do with your child when they are struggling with addiction. And apparently he did a movie with him. I never saw it, but he did a movie with his son. Who knows if his son is actually guilty? They think he is, but So now I'm going to watch This Is Spinal Tap 2 because I've never seen it. Ron.
The thing is that not only Carl Reiner, but his wife, I mean, they seem to be such a wonderful family.
Yeah.
Good people. And you wonder, he was addicted, but you completely lose your brain.
Yeah.
to do something like that.
I think there's also an interesting issue, and I think it's had resonance with a lot of people I've talked with, my age, where you have a child in their 20s, is that there's this whole downward mobility issue, and there are difficult economic times, and sometimes you look back and what's good is bad and bad is good. If you've had the ability to really provide a good life, for a child, but then they can't recreate it necessarily. And obviously that's really magnified for that level of celebrity status.
Yeah.
Um, it's we all think that our children can be pretty fragile, and it's a scary thing.
And it is,
Yes, it
especially
is.
in a when upward mobility has been pretty consistent overall through the last 100 years in the Jewish world, especially. And now we're seeing maybe the generation after me, maybe the first one overall that actually is not as well off as the previous one. It's
Yeah.
expensive these days, but yeah, it can be, the drug thing, and especially when your parents are so well to do, and when you're cut off because of drugs, you do not understand. You think you don't understand it. You're self-involved. You can't imagine why your parents would do this to you. But after so many years of, you just can't do it forever. So, but again, we can enjoy it. We can watch this as Spinal Tap. I read recently that it was Rob Reiner's mother who said the line in When Harry Met Sally, "I'll have what she's having."
Yeah, right.
That was his mother.
Yeah.
So, which is, a great line from maybe the best line in the whole movie, in a movie with lots of great lines.
I think that was Billy Crystal's mother.
Was it? I thought it was right. It could have been. I thought that was Rob Reiner. Billy Crystal was the one who was in the movie, but I thought it was
Yeah,
Rob Reiner's
I
mother.
thought that they
Directed
said
the
that was his mother.
Could be.
Well, whatever.
But I still remember This is Spinal Tap, which I watched years later.
Great movie.
Great movie. I haven't seen the second one.
I haven't seen the second one yet. Now I'm going to look for it tonight.
Yeah, I don't even know where it's on. Where can you watch it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna see right here. Did everybody see the first one? Everybody see the first one? This is Spinal Tap. Where they're the loudest band because it goes up to 11. I love that. The drummer.
That's great. The small Stonehenge.
Yeah, that's right. Spinal Tap 2, according to this, is not online yet. Oh, maybe it's got to be. That must have been a while back. That can't be right now. Okay.
So, Rabbi,
Yes, it is.
you're going to be here. You're going to be here this Saturday, but the next Saturday you'll be by your mother-in-law.
I'm probably not going to be here, but I might come by. I know somebody's coming in town I want to say hi to, so we'll see. We were supposed to go on the 23rd and come back the 26th. My mother-in-law unfortunately broke her hip last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, broke her femur. We just found out right before I came into work. So I don't know how long we're going to be doing now, so we'll see. My sister-in-law lives there, so we'll see. But all our best, guys. May it be next year a better year. May we be freer and happier. And may everyone have a wonderful rest of Hanukkah. Even with anti-Semitism, we know we're all still living great lives and have such a great opportunity here. So enjoy what we have. Happy New Year. And remember, next year, be nice to your rabbi. That's what I think for 2026. Nice to your rabbi, and always give him the type of chocolate he likes. Dark chocolate, semi-sweet. All right? Be safe, guys. Have a good one,
Everybody,
Bye.
Safe travels.
No class
stay
next
well
week.
and
Have a
enjoy.
good holiday.
No
Yeah.
class the week after. And don't forget, Friday night is our Hanukkah party at 5:30. It'll be fun for everybody, and I think we're close to cutting off it because we have so many people. So if you want to come, make sure to sign up.
There's no class for the next 2 weeks.
Next 2 weeks, because I didn't want to do it December 31st, because I found out I have to go do a little procedure, nothing serious. And they were very kind to do it for me on December 31st. Why is it so important to do it on December 31st? We all know, because I've met my deductible.
Yeah.
And I begged them, said, please, anytime. They said, we have December 31st. I said, great, I'll go to Charleston December 31st because it costs me several $1,000s less if I do it. If I do it at 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, it costs me thousands of dollars. But you guys have a good one.
You
and we'll
too.
see you guys later.
Good luck, Rabbi. Well, we'll see you